Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon. Welcome to this session on UAE corporate tax registration. Basically, the FTA decision number 3 that came a few days ago. The purpose of this session is just to go through the provisions which have been outlined for the corporate tax registration. As a housekeeping provision, in case you have any questions, you can please put them in the chat box. For those of you who are watching this live on LinkedIn, you can just maybe put them in the chat box and we will try and take them towards the end of the session. So this is one of the few sessions that we are starting off with this year. We had several sessions earlier here, but due to certain reasons, we had to discontinue them over the last 5-6 months. But you can see more and more of these sessions that will be coming on the latest developments, as well as whatever has happened in the corporate tax. So from that perspective, I look forward to having you in many more of such sessions. We've also created one community for the purpose of UAE corporate tax. And for those of you who might be interested in joining that, there's a link in the comment section of the LinkedIn Live. We'll also put in a link in the Zoom section so that it becomes easier for you to kind of pre-register your interest in that. So in that community, basically, you'll be able to go through the entire provisions of the UAE corporate tax law in the forms of videos. You'll have all the resources in terms of the guides, etc. There will be various polls, etc., which we have been doing for the last 1 year now. And thank you, everyone, for participating in them and making it more meaningful. But let's now get on to the topic for which we have all been gathered here. So basically, we had the FTA decision number 3 of 2024, which outlines certain timelines within which various people are required to register for the corporate tax. Now, until the issue of this decision, obviously, there were different opinions in terms of what is the timeline when a person is going to get registered. But this decision basically kind of consolidates, or rather fixes, I would use the word fix, that would be a better word, as to when a person is required to register. Now, when we look at the registration requirement, basically, a taxable person can be classified into people who are resident and the ones who are non-resident. And the importance of this slide is, if you understand this, then basically you will be able to correlate a lot of things which are there in the subsequent part of the slide. Now, a resident person can include a natural person. So for natural persons, as you are aware, the requirements for registration under the erstwhile law was AED 1 million or more of revenue during a calendar year. So even though they may have a different financial year, if during a calendar year their revenue exceeds 1 million AED, then they are under an obligation to register for corporate tax. That's the provision that has still been kept here in its largest sense. Then you have juridical person, something that would include your companies, LLC, etc. And within the category of resident, you will also have non-resident or foreign company, which are effectively controlled and managed in the UAE. So when we look at the provision of the current decision, there are separate timelines which are prescribed for each of these 3 categories. Now, again, when we come to a category of the non-resident, a non-resident can be the one who has a permanent establishment in the UAE. Permanent establishment, there's a definition given in Article 14, which is there. And then there will be tax treaties where the definition of a PE is said to be existing. Now, one important question that comes up is, are these registration requirements applicable basis the UAE corporate tax law or basis the treaty? Personally, I feel that, and again, this is something, my personal opinion, not necessarily something which is something abiding for the government or the otherwise as well. A PE here would be the PE within the meaning of UAE corporate tax, because otherwise, if a person takes a stand that I don't have a PE as per the tax treaty, then even if they have taxable income, they may never do any form of a compliance here. So when we talk about a PE for the purpose of registration, I feel that a PE would be within the meaning of the UAE corporate tax law. For Nexus, that basically covers the cases where a non-resident has some form of an immovable property, which could be in the form of a building, land, or structures, or fixed equipment as well, from which they are deriving certain form of income. And there are certain examples within the transfer pricing regulations and other places also where, a nexus can also be in the form of kind of controlling a company where you've given them a large part of debt, etc. But for the non-resident part, it's mainly in terms of any immovable property from which the rental income is derived. Now, again, for the UAE sourced income, and again, there's a detailed explanation in the UAE corporate tax law, which covers various income which will be considered as UAE source. There could be two situations. One, you have a taxable income because the UAE sourced income is kind of attributable to the PE, or it exists along with the nexus which is there, or it is not related to either of two of them. So while specifically there's no such mention that if you have this income but you don't have a PE or a nexus, there's no specific mention on the requirement to register, right? So that is not there in this current decision. But with the evolution of process, and currently the withholding tax for all these form of payment to the non-resident is 0%. Maybe it changes at a particular point in time later on, right? But currently, the way the current decision is, there's no specific mention for registration for people who might be earning UAE sourced income, but they don't have a nexus or a permanent establishment, right? A logical view otherwise may be that, you don't need to register them for UAE corporate tax if you don't have a nexus or a PE, but that is something that one should still wait for as things evolve from here. Now, when we talk about the timelines for registration for a resident juridical person, let's say a UAE company, what we need to see is when was this company incorporated or otherwise established or recognized under the UAE corporate tax law. Now, this is something which has been used several times in this decision. So for sake of convenience, we've just abbreviated this as IER, incorporated, otherwise established, or recognized under the UAE corporate tax law, right? So there are two categories of companies. One are the ones who are incorporated prior to March 1, 2024. The second would be the ones which are after March 1, 2024. So the effective date of this particular decision is March 1, 2024. And that's why you're finding all these references which are there for the purpose of the registration. Now, these are the various dates which are given for a residential juridical person who is incorporated, established, or registered prior to March 1, 2024. And for this, the thing is that you need to see what is the date of issue of license of the relevant taxable person. If the date is anywhere between these, irrespective of the year when they were incorporated. What I mean by that is, the company which was incorporated on 1st of January 2023 or 2022, and a company which was incorporated on 1st of January 2018, right? Because they both are incorporated within this date, their registration requirement will be May 31, 2024. It doesn't matter whether the incorporation was in 2023 or whether it was in 2018. And right now, we're just talking about a residential juridical person who was incorporated, established, or registered prior to March 1, 2024. Similarly, you can see for the date of registration for each of the category of the juridical person, right? And the respective dates are given here. But for people who may not be having a license on the effective date, and the effective date is 1st of March 2024. For a person who is not having a license on this particular date, the requirement is that they have to register within 3 months from March 1, 2024, right? So 3 months from March 1, 2024, that will be, actually, I think there's a slight error over here. 3 months from March 1, 2024 would be June 30th, 2024. Sorry, May 30th. My apologies here. May 31, 2024, right? Now, in certain cases, you may also find people who have more than one license. Then the question that comes up is, let's say, for example, if one license was issued on 1st of January 2018, and the second was issued on 31st of March 2020, then how do you consider the date of issue of license? Under the regulations, it is quite explicit that in such a case, you need to consider the date of issue of the first license, which happens to be 1st of January. And therefore, this will be covered in this particular clause, which means that such a person will be required to register before May 31, 2024. It doesn't matter how many more licenses they have. What is relevant is the date of issue of the first license. Now, what about residential juridical persons who are incorporated after March 1, 2024? I'll just use the word incorporated to keep this simple, but wherever this is there, it will be incorporated, established, or registered. So when we talk about such a person, there could be two categories which are defined in this particular FTA decision. The first one is these are incorporated, established, or registered in the UAE. Now, in the UAE could be the mainland UAE or it could be a free zone. If that be the case, then they have to register within 3 months from the such incorporation, right? So let's say a company is incorporated on 1st of April 2024. Yeah, then it is plus 3 months from such a date, right? Whereas if it is a company which is incorporated, established, or registered in a foreign jurisdiction, but because it is effectively managed and controlled in the UAE, and therefore it is considered as a resident of UAE, the date will be 3 months from the end of the financial year of such a person, right? So let's say, for example, if this company is incorporated on 30th of June 2024, yeah, and they follow a financial year, which is, let's say, 1st of July 2024 to 30th of June 2025, then it is 3 months from the end of the financial year, which is 30th of September 2025, right? Because we are saying that this company is incorporated after March 1, 2024, therefore the first financial year will be ending after a period of 12 months, and that's how it is taken. But when we talk about companies incorporated before March 1, 2024, there is no such bifurcation between companies incorporated in the UAE or the ones which are treated as a resident because of effective control and management. After this, the second category we get is about a non-resident juridical person. So we saw a resident juridical person in the first two slides. Now we're looking at a non-resident juridical person. Even these people are classified into two parts: who were non-resident prior to March 1, 2024. Now here the concept of incorporated, established, or registered is not there. The criteria is, were they non-resident prior to March 1, 2024, or were they non-resident after March 1, 2024? So depending on these two, their timelines for registration are as under. For the companies which became non-resident before March 1, 2024, so let's say if you have a foreign company, it has a branch in the UAE, and this branch was basically, let's say, existing from 30th of June 2018 till date. This could be an example of a company which was a non-resident prior to March 1, 2024. In that case, if such a non-resident has a permanent establishment in the UAE, then the deadline for registration for them is 9 months from the PE's date of existence. Now, one question that may come is that, what if the PE came into existence much before 30th of September, let's say 2021? A period of 9 months would have actually lapsed much, much longer ago. But in this case, it might be an issue which might be clarified in due course as to when would a PE be deemed to be having come into existence, right? There could be different views around this thing. One could be the date when the corporate law itself came into existence, because the PE would have subsisted any which ways. So if you look at that from that perspective, 9-month period from the date of PE's existence could actually be February 24. But because February 24 has already lapsed and the circular is effective from March 1, right? The other way could be to look at the financial year of the company. And then again, you can look at the beginning or the end of this thing. But at this stage, honestly, there's some more clarity that may be required as to when a PE would be deemed to have come into existence. In cases where the PE or the branch, let's say, was existing earlier, and therefore the PE was coming into existence earlier. The other case could be that of a nexus, where let's say a non-resident had certain immovable property in the UAE, and he was earning rental income from this. It would be 3 months from March 1, 2024. So again, like I mentioned, basically, we are forming a community where we will be sharing regular resources, UAE corporate tax course, and other things which are there. At this stage, we are just taking pre-registrations for this community. For those of you who might be interested in joining it, you can leave the details in the Google form at the comment section, or you can actually click on this particular link, which was shared with you to register for the Zoom meeting. So at the same link, you can register your interest. For those of you who already registered with the Google form, you don't need to do that. We will be sharing that link with you separately in any case. The second is a case where a person becomes a non-resident and it's a juridical person, but after March 1, 2024, right? In those cases, again, if the non-resident has a PE in the UAE, it will be 6 months from the PE's date of existence, right? Here also, again, one would need a little bit of a clarification that might be required, because different kind of PE can come into existence at different point in time. So what I mean by that is there could be a fixed place PE where a non-resident sets up an office. Here it is much more easier, because once you set up an office, if it is forming a PE from the date of setup of office, there could be a period of 6 months. In case of, let's say, an agency permanent establishment, maybe the date of contract with the agent and when the work starts could be a milestone that could be considered. In case of, let's say, construction PE, etc., where there's a duration under the UAE corporate tax law and the respective treaty, it might be the ending of the period for which, after which the PE comes into existence. But these are all something which are very, very, I would say, fluid kind of things, right? We may get more clarification on that part. Until that solution come in, the only thing one can do is that they can take a considered call. The better position would be that since this is just a registration, it is not the payment of tax as such. So therefore, the earlier that it is done, it is going to be better both from your perspective as well as your client's perspective. For those of you who are working for clients, it's best advised that they do that at the earliest, right? Instead of waiting for, let's say, a 6-month period. So let's say in case of a construction PE, a PE comes into existence for after 6 months. But if you know that on day one, your contract is going to exceed this period of 6 months, might as well take a registration at that particular date itself, rather than waiting for 6 months to get over. For a fixed place PE, once you get into the contract to set up an office, better to get the registration immediately rather than just waiting for a longer period for that perspective. And again, for the nexus, it's 3 months from the date of establishment of the nexus. Now, the next category is the taxability of a natural person which is conducting business or business activity in the UAE. A natural person who's conducting business or business activity in the UAE is basically required to register for corporate tax when their revenue exceeds AED 1 million. Right? So they have to submit the tax registration application if it's a resident natural person, if they are conducting business during calendar year 2024. Now, for a natural person, one of the things is that the registration requirement is based on calendar year, irrespective of the financial year that they might be following. So if a resident natural person is conducting business during calendar year 2024 or thereafter, and their total revenue or turnover, sorry, not the turnover, exceeds 1 million, they have to get registered by 31st March of the subsequent calendar year. What this means is, so if the calendar year ends on 31st of December 2024, right, they have to get registered by 31st of March 2025. But when we talk about a non-resident natural person who's conducting business during calendar year 2024 and their turnover exceeds 81 million, it is 3 months from the date when you exceed the threshold of 1 million. So let's say, for example, if a non-resident starts business on 1st of January 2024, right, and they exceed the threshold on, let's say, 30th of June 2024, a better option would be that it has to be 3 months from the date when they exceed this threshold. So therefore, it should be 30th of September 2024. So for a natural person, it is 31st March of the subsequent year. For a non-resident natural person, it is 3 months once your revenue exceeds AED 1 million. And this is a process which is actually followed in many countries. The reason being that a resident natural person is expected to continue within the country, and therefore they will be filing their tax return, etc. But for non-resident, sometimes what can happen is that a person may come, they may do business and then just go away. And if they are not registered and they have not undertaken the compliance, it's difficult for the tax authorities administratively to collect taxes from such people. If there is a failure to submit the tax registration application, there's a penalty of AED 10,000. With that, we come to an end of the session today, because this is what was there in FTA decision number 3. Like I mentioned, we will be conducting more of such sessions on a regular basis. We have a lot of UAE corporate tax videos which are there, and a lot of students who are going through our international tax course, because that's one thing which is again picking up as with the progression of time. So for those of you who want to again be a part of this community, you can please leave your interest by taking the registration or pre-registering your interest on the Google form that is there. I'm happy to take any questions that might be there. You can just put it in the chat box here for the people who are there on Zoom. And for the other people who are there on LinkedIn, I would just